the crisp October air of 1997, Pine Harbor felt like one of those quiet American towns where nothing ever changed. Emily Hart, a bright-eyed 17-year-old with straight A's and a reputation for never missing curfew, vanished on a Friday night after leaving her part-time shift at Miller's Diner. Witnesses said they saw her walking toward the parking lot, waving at someone inside a silver sedan. Nobody thought twice about it. Emily knew almost everyone in town. But when she didn't show up at home, didn't answer her pager, and didn't come to school the next morning, the calm little town began to crack at the edges. Panic set in fast. Pine Harbor's police launched one of the largest searches the area had ever seen. Volunteers roamed the woods with flashlights, boats combed through Lake Merin, and helicopters circled above the old trails Emily often jogged on. Her parents described her as responsible, predictable, and never the type to run away. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some insisted she'd been taken by someone passing through on the state highway. Others believed she had been lured by someone she trusted. But the strangest part was that no clues were found. Not a shoe print, not a dropped item, not even a reliable sighting. It was as if Emily had simply been erased. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere shifted. The town's smiles faded. Streets emptied earlier than usual, and an unspoken fear settled over Pine Harbor. Students at her high school whispered about the last person who claimed to see her. An elderly gas station attendant who said he saw Emily near the lake shortly after midnight, standing beside a silver car with its headlights off. The police never confirmed the tip publicly, fueling speculation even more. What disturbed everyone wasn't just that Emily disappeared. It was how cleanly she disappeared, leaving behind a void that didn't feel natural, didn't feel accidental, and didn't feel like something that would ever make sense. In the summer of 2025, Pine Harbor woke up to a strange sight. The water level of Lake Merin had dropped nearly 2 feet overnight. At first, nobody panicked. Michigan lakes fluctuated all the time, especially during hot seasons. But by the end of the week, docks sat crooked on dry mud, boats leaned to one side, and the town's fishermen started whispering that something wasn't right. Lake Merin hadn't dropped this drastically in decades, not even during the worst drought years. Local reports blamed unusual groundwater shifts, but residents felt something deeper, something unsettling, something the officials weren't saying. As July passed, the lake kept shrinking, revealing parts of the shore that had been underwater for as long as anyone could remember. Old fishing nets, broken beer bottles from the 80s, and bits of metal started appearing in the muck. Kids flocked to the exposed shoreline at first, fascinated by the sudden discovery of a landscape they'd never seen before. But fascination quickly turned into fear when an elderly fisherman, a man who had lived by that lake his entire life, claimed he saw a heavy chain wrapped around a concrete block rising slowly from the mud. He left his gear right there on the bank and told anyone who'd listened that he'd never step foot near the lake again. By August, the situation had grown too strange to ignore. Scientists were called in, reporters arrived, and the sheriff's department began taping off sections of the shoreline after more odd items surfaced. A cracked headlight, scraps of torn fabric, and what looked like part of an old bumper. People started connecting the dots themselves, whispering the one name the town had avoided for nearly 3 decades: Emily Hart. The draining wasn't random. It didn't feel natural. And as the waterline continued to fall, it became clear that Lake Merin wasn't just giving up water. It was giving up secrets that had been buried since 1997. As the draining continued, Lake Merin's muddy bottom started revealing shapes that didn't belong to nature. At first, it was just debris, twisted metal, fragments of old tires, pieces of rusted tools. But on a foggy September morning, a county worker spotted something larger sticking out of the sludge. At first glance, it looked like a boulder, but as the sun rose and cut through the mist, the outline sharpened. It wasn't a rock. It was the back end of a vehicle, half buried and coated in decades of filth. Authorities rushed in, sealing off the area as residents gathered along the shoreline, watching in silence as the mud was slowly peeled away by excavators. When workers finally uncovered enough for identification, a cold wave rippled through Pine Harbor. The metal was decayed, the windows shattered, and the paint long gone, but the shape was unmistakable. An old silver sedan, the same model Emily Hart was last seen stepping into the night she vanished in 1997. The car doors were fused shut from rust, and one side looked like it had been violently dented, as if it had hit something or someone. Investigators treated the vehicle like a crime scene, frozen in time. Every inch of it reeked of secrets. Even the sheriff, who had been a rookie cop when Emily disappeared, admitted he'd never expected to see that car again, let alone at the bottom of the town's quietest lake. Crowds gathered every day as law enforcement used harnesses and cranes to lift the vehicle from the mud. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed across the nearly empty lake bed, sending chills through anyone listening. Reporters whispered theories, locals held their breath, and Emily Hart's family watched from behind the police line, their faces pale with shock. The moment the car's interior became visible through cracks in the frame, investigators froze, because lying between the front seats was something small, black, and shockingly well preserved, a cassette recorder, sealed in mud but still intact. And with that single discovery, the mystery of Lake Merin shifted from unsettling to terrifying. When investigators carefully pulled the mud-covered cassette recorder from between the sedan's front seats, the entire atmosphere around the lake shifted. Officers who had been talking moments ago fell silent, staring at the small device as if it were something radioactive. How had it survived 28 years underwater? How had it stayed intact while the rest of the car rusted into near oblivion? Evidence techs handled it like a sacred artifact, slipping it into a sealed bag before rushing it to the mobile forensics tent set up near the lake's edge. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but everyone knew if the tape inside had even a second of audio, it could change everything Pine Harbor thought it knew about Emily Hart's disappearance. Forensic specialists worked meticulously, drying the casing with micro heaters, using surgical tools to ease the old tape out without tearing it. Officers watched from outside the tent, leaning forward with the kind of tension normally reserved for hostage situations. When the techs finally placed the cassette into a refurbished player, the sheriff stepped inside, his face tight, his jaw set. The investigators pressed the play button, and for a few seconds, there was only static, soft, whispering static that made the hairs on everyone's arms stand up. Then, suddenly, a voice broke through. It was faint, shaky, and unmistakably that of a young girl, Emily. Her voice trembled as she said her name, her words distorted but still clear enough to make hearts drop. "If someone finds this, please." The audio was grainy, choppy, but every syllable carried pure fear. She spoke about being taken somewhere dark, somewhere cold, somewhere she didn't recognize. The edges of her sentences were clipped by static, but the desperation in her tone didn't need perfect clarity. Investigators leaned closer, straining to catch every word, but before Emily could finish her final thought, the tape shifted, followed by an abrupt thud, like the recorder being grabbed. A second voice entered the audio then, a man's voice, low, steady, chillingly calm. "Turn that off." The tape crackled violently after that, but the voice lingered in the tent like a ghost, freezing the entire room in place. Investigators didn't know who the voice belonged to yet, but they all knew one thing: it wasn't random, and it wasn't over. The moment authorities heard the man's voice on the tape, the entire investigation shifted into overdrive. The sheriff's office contacted retired detectives, reopened boxes of evidence sealed since the late 90s, and brought in federal audio analysts to enhance every second of the recording. For days, the tape played over and over in a secured room, each replay revealing new background sounds, the faint hum of an engine, the soft slosh of water, and what sounded like distant metal scraping, clues suggesting the recording may have taken place inside the very sedan found at the bottom of Lake Merin. Even more chilling was the final few seconds of audio, where Emily could be heard gasping as the man whispered something too soft to fully decipher, something that didn't sound like a threat, but a promise. Investigators built a profile of possible suspects based on the voice. Dozens of interviews were conducted. Old acquaintances and former town residents were tracked down across state lines, and forgotten statements from 1997 were re-examined with fresh eyes. The name that kept resurfacing, quietly at first, then louder, was someone Pine Harbor had once trusted. A man who volunteered during the original search, who lived only a mile from the lake, and who mysteriously moved away just months after Emily vanished. Back then, he'd seemed harmless. Now, with new forensic tools and the recovered tape, that innocence looked staged, rehearsed. Detectives noted how certain key details from his old statements suddenly didn't line up, especially regarding the night Emily disappeared. But the real break came when analysts isolated a subtle background sound from the tape, a rhythmic clinking, almost like keys hitting metal. When cross-referenced with old police logs, the sound matched a specific tool belt worn by maintenance workers at the Lakeside Lodge in the 90s, a place the suspect had worked briefly but never mentioned in his interviews. That single overlooked detail snapped the entire puzzle into place. Investigators realized they weren't just dealing with a missing person case anymore. They were staring at a cover up nearly 3 decades old, one that had rested quietly beneath the waters of Lake Merin, waiting for the day the lake would fall and expose the truth piece by terrifying piece. As the truth finally rose from the bottom of Lake Merin, Pine Harbor felt the weight of 28 silent years break all at once. The suspect, once a neighbor, once a trusted face, was brought back in cuffs, his expression cold and unchanged, as if he had expected the past to stay buried forever. But the lake had other plans. Emily Hart's voice, preserved by mud and time, became the key that shattered the lie he'd built his life upon. And in the courtroom, when those haunting final seconds of the tape were played, even the judge sat frozen, listening to a girl who refused to vanish quietly. The town gathered at the drained shoreline days later, staring at the dark pit where the lake used to be. Some said the silence felt heavier now, like the land itself had been holding its breath for almost 3 decades. Emily's family placed flowers near the spot where the car had been found, their tears mixing with the damp earth. For the first time in years, Pine Harbor slept with its doors unlocked, not because the town felt safe, but because the monster hiding among them had finally stepped into the light. And as the workers prepared to refill Lake Marin, one of them claimed he heard something echo from the empty basin, like a faint whisper carried through the wind. Maybe it was the shifting mud. Maybe it was nothing at all. But some swear it sounded like a girl's voice, finally letting go.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.